Irene at osmail.com. Dear Vera, well, talk about the best laid plans of mice and pregnant women. After all the trouble she went to, booking the best doctors and an anaesthetist and a private room, and thinking she can just play God and decide to have her baby delivered on an operating table at a time that's convenient to her busy little diary, my daughter Leslie gave birth to her new baby girl on the kitchen floor, braced between the washing machine and the tumble dryer, while I was emailing you. By the time I got to it, it was practically all over. I just had to clean up and cut the cord with the kitchen scissors. The paramedics said I'd done a very professional job, but then I've seen it performed so many times on peak practice. The baby is beautiful and has the most luxurious strawberry blonde curly hair, so although they're going to christen her Sarah Jane, we call her Bubbles. Unfortunately, I was so busy with Leslie's nether regions, I didn't have time to notice my other little granddaughter, Cheryl Marie, watching intently from the doorway. After witnessing the mysteries of birth at close quarters, she is now inclined to believe my story about how babies are made, and has started glaring angrily at Brian, Leslie's partner, every time he comes in the house. Mind you, I'm afraid I do likewise. His divorce isn't through yet, so my poor little Bubbles is illegitimate. What times we live in. I've had time now to read your last email properly, and I'm so sorry to hear about your poor daughter Karen's troubles. Is she still managing to keep the baby inside her? But then again, why wouldn't the little mite be in a hurry to get out when its parents are in such a rush to get it in, so to speak? Everything is now with this generation. They've no concept of planning and waiting and patience. Got to go. Leslie's shouting for a cup of tea, and I'd better check Bubbles' nappy. With much love from one exhausted granny to another, Irene. P.S. If you do go ahead with selling your recipes, ask your publishers if they would like a proposal for an Australian cookery book. I found a wonderful way with fricasseed emu.
Vera's Voyages at littleshag.com. Dear Irene, congratulations! Another little girl. I do so hope my daughter Karen doesn't have another boy. Nelson's not walking yet, though goodness knows his legs are long enough, and he's already such a handful. When I asked Sabrina what she'd like her mummy to have next, she said a supply of condoms. Perhaps she understands more about the process than I thought. I'll never know the half of what she learnt when we lived on that trailer park. Anyway, whatever sex Karen's baby is, it's still inside. Unlike my son Howard and his partner Anthony's, they've had a terrible time trying to get their host mother Natasha pregnant. Turns out they both got low sperm count. Has there been a case of that on peak practice? Howard blames Anthony for riding horses in his youth. Anthony blames Howard for wearing tight trousers. They both blame each other for eating too much fish. Apparently the salmon round here are riddled with female hormones. They've had the most awful rows about it, and all in front of the Dales TV cameras. I never realised how intimate a life with sheep would be. It's years since I've seen Howard's private parts, and now he's about to share them with the nation. Thank goodness they've enlisted the help of Singen and his veterinarian syringe. I just pray Dales TV put a bag over Natasha's head before they film what he does with it. The good news is my location catering has been a great success. The director says he's never known a film crew get back to work so fast. Lots of love to you all, and a big kiss for Bubbles. With a name like that, she'll certainly be carrying on the family traditions. Have one for me, Vera.
Irene at osmail.com. Dear Vera, it is amazing the speed of this email business, isn't it? One of the products of this now generation that I approve of. And talk about the saving on postage. I'm thinking that I might buy a computer myself when I get back to Heather Green, so I can continue to communicate electronically. I couldn't sleep last night, so I started skirping the web, as I've seen your little Sabrina do. And you'd be gobsmacked, to use Leslie's favourite word, to know what you can do on it. You can go anywhere and buy anything. You'd never need to leave your house again if you didn't want to. Must be a boon to agoraphobics. Back to your last missive. I do think you're being overcritical of baby boy Nelson. How on earth could he be expected to be walking at his age? I wonder if you're not being tainted with this now business yourself. As for Howard, I don't wonder you sound shocked about his goings-on. For myself, I can't say, in all honesty, that I want you to continue to keep me informed about his and Anthony's progress in that department. I think there's been a misunderstanding about my Australian recipes. I didn't mean for you to have them. I just thought that your publisher might be interested in me doing my own book. Thank you, incidentally, for sending a kiss to Bubbles. I shall gloss over your allusion to family traditions about drinking. I've been skimming through some of Leslie's psychology self-help books. Have you ever heard of projection? I'll leave it with you to think about. Must trot off. I've rejoined the Creative Writing for Senior Citizens class now. I'm back in Melbourne, and it's my first session today. With fondest regards, Irene.
The greenhouse, the bothy. Dear Irene. I don't know that I do approve of this addiction to speed. Email is all very well, but it's put me in touch with so many foreign parts, and each one expects an answer not so much now as yesterday. There isn't a shoot today. They're still waiting for the results from the last insemination. I don't know how the mother bore up, but Singen got back knackered. So for once I've got time to myself. I decided to indulge in some much-needed peace and reflection, and as you see, I'm writing this in the greenhouse. It's so pleasant to be surrounded by growing things. I'm sitting next to Karen's tomato plants, which I, of course, have been left to tend. They are a beautiful shade of viridian, and I'm breathing in their earthy scent, which I must say is very lulling. Oops, dropped off there for a while. Oh, now if I'd been at the computer, I'd have crashed onto the keyboard, deleted everything and got an imprint of the alphabet on my forehead. See what I mean? Going at my own pace, slow and steady, I'll achieve much more. You might want to consider that point if your psycho self-help books haven't made it. Oh dear, dozed off again. Really, the atmosphere in here is very heady. I feel as though I've had a glass too many, following in your footsteps. Talking of footsteps, I think I'd better have a little walk. I'll leave Nelson, even he's less hyperactive than usual, snoozing in his pram, as the ground outside's very bumpy. Karen ordered the garden to be landscaped as part of the bothy renovations, but like the rest of her plans, it's on hold. Much later. In bed with slight concussion. Can't read the above owing to double vision, but I think I mentioned the garden's in upheaval. In fact, to call it a demolition site wouldn't be exaggerating. I was a little wobbly on my feet, no doubt due to the unaccustomed catnap, and I hadn't taken 3 steps before I'd tumbled into the pit which is destined to become the kidney-shaped swimming pool. Then, Irene, the strangest thing. Against the sunlight I saw this dark, towering silhouette. Naturally, in my concussed state, I thought I was in an episode of The X-Files and was about to be abducted by extraterrestrials. But he, for it was a he, dragged me up the bank and carried me to the shelter of the coach house. He seemed to know exactly where I lived, sat me on the sofa, made me a cup of tea, and at last I got a proper look at him. Guess who he was? None other than your mystery man. Unfortunately, I passed out at that point, and when I came round, Singen was bending over me with a bucket of water. He had disappeared without trace. When I tried to explain it to Singen, he put a cold flannel on my head and told me to stop babbling. This must be more than coincidence. Who on earth, or out of it, is he? Yours in awe, Vera.
Irene@osmail.com. Dear Vera, call Heather Green Police immediately and ask for DC Hogg. Tell him about the stalker moving to Shagthorn. And tell him from me I have no intention of returning to England until he is in police custody. The stalker, not DC Hogg. And in the meantime, don't go out yourself. If you do have to nip down to the shops or something, keep a very tight hold on your handbag. Young men only follow old women for one thing. I showed your email to Leslie, who thinks I'm overreacting and has been trying to talk me out of getting you to tell the police. She sends her best wishes for your speedy recovery, however, and asks if you or Singen could take Karen's laptop to her in the hospital as she is sending her an email. She is most insistent about it, but then they did get on like a house on fire when they were here together last year. Much love, and all good wishes for a brief but thorough convalescence. Irene.
Leslie@osmail.com. Dear Karen, your mum got stoned in your greenhouse just from the atmosphere of what she calls the tomatoes, and then claims to have seen a stalker. Must be good stuff. But my mum's mailed her to call in the cops, so you better get Singen to move the plants or harvest them quick. Brian has turned out to be really boring. He was much more interesting when he had a wife to go home to. Mum's going on about marriage, but I'm thinking of telling him to bog off. Better go. She keeps sneaking in and trying to read this over my shoulder. Isn't it hell having the old bag staying with us? Love, Leslie.
Vera's Voyages at littleshag.com. Dear Irene, took your advice and rang DC Hogg, but all I got was his voicemail. He hasn't returned my call yet. Obviously Heather Green is a hotbed of crime, and he's out stopping it. You don't have his email address, do you? I've stayed indoors since the incident. I even considered moving up into Karen's turret, but decided I was in danger of becoming agoraphobic. Besides, Mystery Man seemed far from menacing. He had a lovely smile, almost angelic. I wish I could place whom he reminds me of. Oh, someone's banging wildly on my front door. Whoever can that be at 1:45 in the morning? I'll just get Singen's animal tranquilizer darts. 2 a.m, false alarm. It was Howard in tears after another tiff with Anthony. Dale's TV has suspended filming. They say it's lost the feel-good factor. Must finish and bring Howard round. I shot off the tranquilizer dart before I realised. More soon, Vera.
Karen@greatshag.com. Dearest Leslie, no worries. Sent Singen to sort the old bill at our local Masonic. Deal is, they get 3 plants and we get 2. I've got them here in my hospital room, hidden behind the pots of bloody chrysanths your ma sent me. Not that I can reach them with my legs in bloody stirrups. Put me off bondage forever. Like you, fed up with bloody men, bloody babies and bloody mothers. Bloody love, Karen.
Irene@osmail.com. Dear Vera, I don't know DC Hogg's email address. When I was dealing with him, I was still computer illiterate. But for heaven's sake, keep trying to get him on the phone. I can't imagine why he hasn't been available. Heather Green is, for the most part, a peaceful village. Obviously, you can't stay indoors forever, but neither can you live in constant terror of being thrown into empty swimming pools by a perpetrator unknown. Using your son-in-law Singen's veterinarian tranquilizer gun to defend yourself was an inspiration. But if you go round firing it off by mistake like that, the whole of Shagthorn, both little and great, will be asleep. How is your poor son Howard now? It is the weekend here in Australia. I suppose it is in England too, but once again I feel so far away, which I am, that I find it hard to imagine that it still exists. Thank heavens for the email, such a lifeline. My daughter Leslie and her partner Brian have gone away for a couple of days, leaving me with the usual expressed breast milk in the fridge and in sole charge of my 2 granddaughters. Leslie and Brian have been having problems, apparently, and need to be alone to remind themselves quite what they saw in each other in the first place. Honestly, if they can't remember after this short time, what on earth are their memories going to be like when they get to our age? And how terrible to break up Brian's marriage and then wonder if they'd done the right thing. But that's typical of Leslie. She's always been faddy. Sometimes I wonder if our generation wasn't so elated that the war was over and so determined that our children should inherit a brave new world with free this and free that. All we succeeded in doing was to spoil them and give them unreasonable expectations of life. I mean, what would Winston Churchill make of things if he was still with us? He must be rolling in his grave. Baby Bubbles is crying for a 4 a.m. feed, so I must stop. I'm exhausted but can't seem to sleep. Too much worry. The good news, though, is that the airline have finally found my luggage. It wasn't in Kuala Lumpur, but Helsinki, so at least I now recognise myself when I look in the mirror. I looked a real sight in Leslie's crop tops. Reply soon, old friend. I'm so lonely. Love, Irene.
Vera's Voyages at littleshag.com. Dear Irene, your email made my heart bleed. Oh, I do so know what you mean about being lonely. Sometimes it's at its worst when you're in the bosom of your family. I said as much straight to camera on Dale's TV's A Life with Sheep yesterday. The camera crew were almost in tears. Howard was furious with me. I'd come out for a visit. I'd love to see Oz after all your tales, though St. Urban doesn't sound quite as exotic as India, but I'm absolutely indispensable here. My daughter Karen's in hospital for the foreseeable future. She made so much fuss about privacy, they've moved her to her own room, for which, of course, Singen is paying. He, poor lamb, is rushed off his feet with 2 veterinarian surgeries a day and all the outreach visits. He's had to go back several times to see my son Howard and his partner Anthony's surrogate mother. Trouble with the syringe or something. But the good news is they are at last pregnant. Howard is over the moon. Now he and Anthony are arguing about which of their little squiggles did it. As they've got a result, TV parlance, and everyone's smiling again, Dale's TV are back. The director, a nice lad despite his stubble, said I was wasted behind the scenes and I should get in front of the camera. I took to it like a natural. I don't know that I've ever confided to you, but when I was a girl I longed to tread the boards. Of course, my father would never have tolerated it. To him an actress was no different from a prostitute. It was only because his local pub was called the Nell Gwyn. It was a notorious haunt of ladies of the night. I often wondered if he felt so strongly about them why he went there. Now, Irene, I'm saying this for your own good. Do not go back to the bottle. No matter how desperate you feel, resist it, old friend, or it's not only Winston Churchill who'll be rolling around in his grave. I know he's one of your heroes, but there are some of his footsteps in which you wouldn't want to follow. Needless to say, I mean the above in a loving, caring way. Your own Vera.
Karen at greatshag.com. Dear Leslie, what's happening with boring Brian? Have you made it up or kicked him out? Things have improved in here since I got the private room. I'm allowed to move about as long as I don't leave the hospital. As if. I can't bear the idea of going back to the bothy. It's too full of Singen and the bloody kids. Seriously thinking of running away as soon as I've dumped this one. They'd be much happier with Ma looking after them. Of course, she loves it. Keeps going on about being needed. Send us a mail soon. I'm so bored. Karen.
Irene at osmail.com. Dear Vera, you may down-cry Sir Winston all you like, but just ask yourself in a quiet moment what he would have said about your son-in-law Singen, who, lest we forget, is a vet, not a gynecologist, impregnating a paid stranger on television with a syringe full of semen from 2 homosexuals, one of which is your own son, so that she may bring forth this strange fruit and hand it over for cash to said deviants to bring up. Personally, I would fight them on the beaches every time. Instead, you encourage it. And you say that the good news is that they've succeeded. Call me old-fashioned if you will, but who can the little mite call mother when it's born? Meanwhile, here in Melbourne, I'm having to cope with a new granddaughter born out of wedlock because my daughter Leslie couldn't keep her hands off another woman's husband. I'm just left feeling that the more time goes by, the more of my life seems to have been in vain. However, nil desperado Irene has always been my battle cry, and to this end I managed to have a good long chat with Brian, Leslie's partner, the other evening, on our own while Leslie was resting. Though goodness knows what she's got to be tired about, I seem to be the only one to notice when little Bubbles needs feeding or changing. But back to my main thrust. I managed finally, after some subtle hyperbole, thank heavens for my creative writing course, to fire Brian up enough to promise to push through his divorce with all his vim and vigour to a speedy conclusion. I made him hold little Bubbles in his arms and swear on her dear little golden head that he would make her legitimate, albeit retrospectively. He's been out and bought Leslie a socking great engagement ring at vast expense, which he showed me today in secret, with tears in his eyes, and he's going to propose officially at the weekend. This, Vera, is what I think of as the role of the responsible mother, whatever her age, guiding her children towards a more wholesome lifestyle, not giddily encouraging them to go their own way as you do with yours. For instance, if a son of mine had told me he was gay in his confused early years, I would have explained to him that it was just a whim and not something that had to be acted upon. I would have reminded him of those old-fashioned notions, willpower and self-denial. I would have introduced him to every eligible girl within a 50-mile radius of Great Shagthorn, and if they had failed to raise a response, I would have told him just to keep his hand on his halfpenny. One thing I would definitely not have done would be to egg him on about artificial insemination, but that is obviously where we differ. Once more, I shall gloss over your allusions to my so-called drinking habit. Honestly, talk about the pot calling the kettle. You may have chosen to forget who it was who had 17 long, slow screws in Mallorca when we were on our tour of Europe, but I certainly haven't. Nor have I forgotten the consequences, but I shall not go down that alley just now. I shall merely say Manolo and leave you to weave your way unsteadily down memory lane. Naturally, it goes without saying that I too mean everything aforementioned in the most loving and caring way. But of course, a lot of your behaviour clicks into place, now I know your father frequented a bawdy house. Nobody would argue that it was a nice beginning for you, Vera, but if you're determined to try, you can rise above the nasty bits in your gene pool. With all loving and friendly wishes, Irene.
Vera's Voyages at littleshag.com. Dear Irene, you know where you can stuff your loving and friendly wishes. Vera.
Karen at greatshag.com. Dear Leslie, I hear you're going to marry boring Brian after all. Ma showed me a rambling email Irene had sent her when she'd obviously had a few tinnies too many. We noticed she was back on the sauce when she was here. Anyway, girl, she reckons Brian's bought you a socking great engagement ring. So don't go giving him back to his wife till you've got it safely on your finger. I haven't got a wedding ring on mine anymore. My finger had puffed up like a black pudding and the triage nurse had to sew it off. Ring, not finger. Think it's an omen? Brett, the triage nurse, is a mate of Howard and Anthony's and a real pet. Pops in to share a spliff and has promised to sneak me some pharmaceutical Charlie. Singen won't give me Class A's and has even tried to get me off the weed while I'm sprogging, a sanctimonious bastard. Karen.
Howard and Anthony at sheepshag.com. Dear Irene, my mother showed me your last email, which had us all in tears. Anthony and I were shocked to the fundament at your medieval attitudes. Haven't you ever watched Queer as Folk? Not that Great Shagthorn is exactly a gay village. More's the pity. Your comments were especially hurtful after the way we've always welcomed you here. Last time, if I remember rightly, you said we were gorgeous boys and you wished we were your sons. You even encouraged us to try for adoption, saying why not? We were just like a married couple. Of course, by then you had had the greater part of 2 bottles of Sheep Dipper's Chardonnay. We can only conclude you've joined that band of losers darling Tony Blair calls the forces of conservatism, who read The Sun and are deeply homophobic. Age is no excuse for embracing the attitudes of Hitler, even if the last war is still your yardstick. Mother may have other foibles, but she's remarkably open and tolerant about sex. Things she told us about your travels together, which at the time we were inclined to disbelieve, now make perfect sense. The only Manolo she remembers, by the way, was a bartender over whom you threw a jug of sangria. I dare say you will find excuses for all of this, but they will fall on deaf ears at Sheep Dippers. It's such a pity, as we were going to invite you to be godmother to our baby when he/she is born. But now we're going to get a lesbian friend from Stonewall. Howard.
Dear Vera and Howard, got your emails and I'm in a torment of retribution. I read mine again. Think I went over the top. Please forget and forgive. Don't know what got into me. If I had a hair shirt, I'd be wearing it. Sometimes I wonder if I'm not a little bit depressed. Yours, penitentiarily, Irene.